Welcome to FYI. I'm Barry ZeVAN. I apologize for the voice, getting over a little bit of pneumonia, but it's not contagious. I guarantee to my guest today, who is Christine Fournier, who is an authoress of incredible books based on her life in the super big time on Broadway and on national tours, and just as a choreographer and a dancer, Christine worked directly for Bob Fosse and Neil Simon in Sweet Charity on Broadway as a dancer, and also, and of course, worked with Bob Fosse's wife, and her name is escaping me now. Gwen Verdon.
Yeah.
Gwen Verdon, yes,
Yeah.
excuse me, senior moment, but, which we're allowed on this show,
Absolutely.
Christine. And then, of course, did national tours and was in Tokyo in West Side Story. And all of this has culminated in your deciding to write books about being what they call a gypsy.
Yes.
And please explain, first of all, welcome,
Thank
Christine.
you, Barry. Nice to be here.
Wonderful to have you. First of all, what's a gypsy to those who are not oriented into show business?
Well, most people assume a gypsy is a person who travels across Europe during barren landscapes, surviving winters on these little wooden carts and little fires and people huddling together. That's not the gypsy we're talking about. We're talking about a beloved term for a performer who goes from show to show, which is the nature of our work. You do one show in one particular, and then you're out of a job, and then you have to move on and find another job, and that's just the nature of being a gypsy. So, gypsy showbiz is something quite different.
Yes, amen to that. And between the gypsy roles, there are waitresses and waiters, right?
Oh yes, absolutely. You do anything you can to survive so that you can continue pursuing the thing you love most, which is performing.
Do your books reflect that, the fact that it's kind of an insecure life in some ways?
Oh yes, absolutely. How it all started actually was I was going through some papers and I found an old route sheet. A route sheet is when the performer signs a contract and it's a tour, it's a listing of all of the venues, dates, and cities that you will be playing on this tour. And the first book is How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, was 22 cities in 9 months.
Oh my God.
So here I am going through old scrapbooks and I found this route sheet and I looked at it and I went, oh my goodness. So I sat down with a line pad and I just cross-checked the cities, and all of a sudden the memories started popping up of all of these amazing experiences, because it was really a coming of age for me to leave Minnesota and first go to New York, but then get cast in a show that was going to cover virtually the whole United States in 9 months. So I decided to write down the city to city, and sure enough, all these incredible visions came up of these experiences as a young girl in the business. And I thought, you know, this would be a great grid for a book. So I just started writing it, and it was interesting, all of my books start with an audition scene, because of course that's the doorway to the work. That's kind of the starting gate. So I thought it was an interesting approach to have the characters start in an audition situation, then the reader is right with them, and then it unfolds. But the first book, I established all of these characters based on people I'd worked with and have known, not all directly one person, but you know, a number of composites of people or types that you run into. And then those characters literally travel through all 6 books of the series. Some kind of disappear and go away, and then a couple villains show up and then they go away, and then so most of them evolve and grow along as the reader actually follows them and watches them grow up. So you get very invested in the characters, and I think that's been the most fun. But they are based on definitely, here's a good analogy. If you are a theater goer, say you're in the Twin Cities, but you don't go often, but you go out with another couple, first you go to a nice dinner, then you cross Hennepin and you go into the Orpheum Theater, and you sit down, and for 2.5 hours, you are transported into some zone that you weren't expecting, and you're there in the zone, and then at the end, the lights come up and the curtain closes, the orchestra stops and goes away, and you're walking out of that building with the other couple, and you're still in the zone. And then you go and you have maybe an after evening drink, and then you go about your business. Well, sometimes for weeks people are chatting it up about various shows they've seen. In this case, The Wiz or Phantom of the Opera or Les Mis, or some of the many shows have come through here. And my books are more about the people who put you in the zone. So there's a lot of backstage interactions. I don't just work with the performers, but also the crew, the types of people you'll find you're working with, the orchestra, the management. So it really covers that whole range of showbiz, I think, in that respect, from, of course, my eyes and my perspective, having been through it as a chorine.
Do you feel that people, first of all, these books would be for anybody who's interested in show business, in my opinion?
Oh, yes.
Period.
Yes.
But do you think that some young people possibly, or even older people, who want to get into the business might be discouraged by the fact that there's one heck of a lot more to it than just performing
Exactly.
on stage?
Because I also, in the writing, create the characters and their struggles and their lives and where they came from. The first book is a flashback on each character as to how they got where they are in the present. And one of the interesting things about all this is that you really can relate to these people because they are human beings, number one, first, and then what they do is of course, their profession. But I wanted to make that a very personal interaction between reader and the characters, so that they would really feel like they were reading or seeing authentic people rather than just made up people. So that's what I tried to do.
How many books in the series so far?
I just published the 6th.
Okay.
I'm not sure yet if I'm going to go on, because I've really kind of created a point where everybody's kind of where they should be. But an idea came to me, and it's kind of a works in progress that relates to the first 6, and that is doing a book, Gypsy Legacies and Mentors, and about people in the Twin Cities who have been mentored by, in their profession, who influenced them, and then now they in turn are mentors. And I thought that would make it, and do it on an interview basis, and then write their stories in chapter form. So that would cover a lot of people in town who are certainly in the forefront as far as our theater community and in music community as well, dance. So there are a lot of people out there. It would be fun to interview and find out who influenced them.
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah, I've said many times, unless your name is Rockefeller, Gates, Buffett, we all need people to give us the first leg up, or the second leg, or subsequent legs.
Exactly.
Because regardless of the fact that you may have all the talent in the world, I sometimes throw in my own little thoughts here. But,
oh, yes.
I remember one time with Maureen O'Hara out in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, she told me, she said, so many people who have so much talent never get the breaks.
That's right.
And a lot of people who have no talent get all the breaks.
Exactly.
And it's a business that is precarious, but she also said never, ever, ever give up.
No.
And that might be a good analogy too.
It's very good. And I think timing. Years ago, I was studying with a wonderful acting teacher in New York when I was in the chorus. I wanted to develop more of my full triple threat of possibilities. And I asked him one day in class, and he had been formerly married to Barbara Cook, who, as we know, was a great Broadway star. And he taught her everything she ever knew about acting, but that was never brought out. But George Abbott made her a big star. And he was now, unfortunately, they had divorced and gone their separate ways, but he was a phenomenal acting coach. And he also was on the board of the Actors Studio, served on the board. And I asked him one day in class, I said, what is your opinion of if you could create a formula for success, I mean, hypothetically, of course, what ingredients would be absolutely essential? And I've never forgotten this, and I pass this on to my students, is one, the raw talent. Good idea. But then you have to train the talent. You have to have the experience to bring that fine-tuning forward. Then once you have that, training, you have to show up You have to make phone calls, you have to go and knock on doors, you have to go to the auditions, as horrible as they can be, and they are, they're just gut-wrenching, but you have to show up in order to be seen, and then to follow up. So that was another point he made. And then the point that really struck me was, and then having the maturity to handle what you're given when the break comes and not blow it. And then lastly, which is another, I think, very important, is keeping your core, your values, keeping those intact and never compromising that.
There's an expression in the business called flop sweat. Can you describe what that means?
Not sure what that means.
Oh, really?
No, I've never heard that one. I like
sorry.
it, but I don't know it.
I think it means, and I thought you might know, sorry. It's that you're so terrified in an audition. You know you can do it, but you flop because you're sweating so much.
Yeah, true, very true.
It's the worst.
Yeah.
Of all you've done, I mean, you're a fantastic choreographer and dancer, but do you enjoy the teaching part of it too?
Oh, that's a wonderful question, Barry. Thank you. I absolutely love the mentoring part now. What's humorous is I go in, I work with 13 to 18-year-old teenagers who are just wild. They're so gifted, and yet they're so raw. They need molding, and I get to work with them once a week, and I teach them some of the material I was doing back in the 60s. So they're learning the history. They're learning shows like How to Succeed. They're learning shows like Where's Charlie and South Pacific and Kiss Me Kate and some of the really gold standard shows. But what's so amazing is to give them that opportunity to learn which is so ingrained in you. I mean, my muscle memory at my age, the muscle memory is astounding. I can remember every single count, every single step of the work I did back in the 60s, because one of the big things I did in the business, I was a swing dancer. And swing dancers are responsible to cover, if it's say it's a dance number or a production number with 6 women's spots, you are responsible for the 6 women's spots in the routine.
Wow.
And if one is out for vacation or illness, you walk in at half hour and you sign the check-in board and you say, I'm here, and they go, oh, you're on for Susie, and you have a half hour. You have to know that stone cold. Well, for some reason, I absolutely gravitated to that kind of work. I absolutely loved, it was kind of a rush, the adrenaline was going, but I was also a quick study, and I was a detail person. I wasn't the greatest dancer who came down the block technically, but I was strong, I could remember things, and so I loved that opportunity and responsibility. And so from show to show, I always covered something. To not get off the track here, that muscle memory just kind of went and stayed. So now I'm teaching routines that I did when I was in my 20s. And when I walk into a room, I can be exhausted, just the weight of the world, and I walk in, and for an hour and a half, I'm doing it. Physically, I'm not as able to do what I could do when I was in 20s, but the adrenaline is still there, the excitement is still there, and here I'm doing all these movements, and the kids are standing there gaping, and I get all through, and I turn and say, how is that for Grandma? And they all go, I wish my grandma could do that. They sit in a chair all day and do nothing.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, what a grace I have to be able to still physically do most of it, but I think it's the enthusiasm and the memory of it that really carries me. And so I walk out of there, and I'm 23 years old here, and I get into the car and I drive home, and then I get out of the car. And I'm now back 77 years old again. So it's just amazing what that memory will do for you, and that feeling that excitement and joy. It's just absolutely restorative. So I kind of count on that old career to be able to teach and give back and pay forward to these young people who are so potentially so gifted. And some of them will go on, not all, but there are a few that spark you, and you know that they're going to go on and do something really terrific. And so that's exciting.
You're right about the adrenaline rush. There are many times still in my life, now at age 81.
Oh my, can't believe
that. But I still feel in my 20s or 30s when I'm performing or where I'm, well, even doing something like this. It just, it's a blessing.
Yes, it
and
is.
it's definitely a gift and something that shouldn't be taken for granted.
Ever, right. And,
Yeah.
and it's a natural, I look at you and I think of your career and having met you many years ago in a theater production, but watching you on the air and seeing how you work with people, and it was magic, and it was like in your DNA.
Oh,
and that came from, that didn't just happen overnight. We both know that. That came from a long series of trial and error and going to jobs, and maybe jobs you didn't like so much, or you had to eat, so you had to stay with the job. I know those stories because you've shared those as a friend over the years. And but you know, you just stay with it, and if you love it and you're dedicated and you are so committed to it, then it just stays with you forever. It really, really does. I'll tell you a fun story, if I may share with your viewers, about this swing job. When Bob Fosse was staging, in the original company of Sweet Charity, he was staging a number that I think everyone knows now, Hey Big Spender, and there were 7 of us. The odds were 400 girls auditioned for the Sweet Charity, 7 of us made it. I think I was on the alternate list. Somebody dropped out and I was the first call after that. But anyway, regardless, I'm sitting in the studio and he's blocking Big Spender. And there were 7 of us, and 6 of the girls were working the number with the 2 leads, Helen Gallagher and Thelma Oliver. And I was sitting there, kind of like a bump on a log for the whole morning. And then they took a lunch break, and Bob Fosse was standing with his back to me, talking to the stage manager. And I don't know, that Minnesota chutzpah, or whatever that is, or naivete, if you want to call it. I went up to him and I tapped him on the shoulder, and he turned around and he went, "Yes, Chris." He looked quite surprised to see me there. And I said, "Say, Bob," like we were old buddies, "Say, Bob, would you like me to swing the number?" And he looked at me like I was like one step ahead of him. He hadn't thought of that yet. And so he looks over at the stage manager and says, "Hey, George, do we have a dress for Chris?" And of course, I'd already been fitted for a costume. And so they said, "Yeah, go ahead." So it was nothing in a contract anywhere. It was just, they started paying me the extra $5 a week to cover those numbers. And it just became such a joy to do it. I didn't feel like I was left out because I wasn't in the regular line, but I got to learn it all. So then 6 months into the run, I was doing my own spot in a number called The Rich Man's Frug. And Bob fired the swing girl who covered 6 spots. And I already knew 1. So I went to management, and this new person coming in would have had only 2 weeks to learn the whole show. And I went up to the stage manager and I said, "You know, I'd like to know if I could be considered for the new swing job on The Rich Man's Frug." And he looked at me like I had 6 heads. Because some people consider that a punishment job. They want to be in the regular 8 shows a week. You know, it's that, they want that glory, and yeah, I was there. So they said, "Well, yeah, go ahead." They talked it over in management, and they said, "Yeah, go ahead." So I now was able, 6 months into the run, and I was dying to learn something new because it starts to become very repetitive night after night. So the dance captain, Eddie Gasper, took me aside and he said, "Okay, every Wednesday, while this girl is still in the show and not fired, she can cover you, and you can go out and learn visually all these other spots." So for the next 2 weeks, every chance I got, he would send me out to learn a new girl's spot. So the last week, this girl had been suddenly gone. The new girl came into my spot, and I came at half hour, and somebody said, "Oh, so-and-so is out," and I hadn't learned that spot yet. That was the last one to go. So Eddie and I went to the basement of the Palace Theater, and we just ran it verbally. "Okay, you're gonna go over here, and then in 8 counts you'll be over here," and I was all over the map. And so I went on, no problem. Eddie was beside himself. He was so worried. But it was like, you know, kind of the deer in front of headlights, kind of like just automatic, and did it, didn't think about it. But that was just a great lesson in watching and observing and just learning all you can, because it is a craft, and it's your responsibility. If you're given the gift of opportunity, it's really important to really go at it full swing.
Amen.
Otherwise, don't do it.
Sure. I've forgotten to ask, what are the names of your books?
Oh, well, the first book is Gypsy Nights, Lives on Tour, and I literally do the tour in the book. The second one is Gypsy City, A New Beginning. That takes place of an original Broadway show, which is based on some of my adventures in Sweet Charity, but it's not Sweet Charity, it's a dance review. The third book is Gypsy World, Beyond Broadway, and that Broadway show goes to Japan. Now, I spent time in Japan with West Side Story, so I was able to base all of those feelings and experiences, and even some of the characters going through. And being able to work with the culture was so much fun, because I got so involved with the Japanese while I was there and their culture. So that all just kind of came back, and I had a Japanese-English book to the side, and I could utilize some of the language, so it was very authentic. And I think that's my favorite of the 6. And then the 4th one is Gypsy Road, New Adventures, and that's kind of the fictionalized last tour. I did 2 tours of How to Succeed. The second one was a short West Coast tour after they closed the Broadway show. They took one more time out, and they got everybody who had ever done the show together, and we did a West Coast tour. So that's based on that tour, but it's also parallel with the choreographer becoming a movie director. So you've got a little bit of Hollywood thrown in. That was kind of, I consulted our mutual friend Joel Tom on that one, because Joel had worked with so many junkets and so on. Then the 5th book was Gypsy Life, The Return, and 2 of my main characters decide to move to Minnesota and continue their career here. Number 6 is roughly based on the original Chanhassen. So I'm able to use some of that material of what that was like to watch that building go up out of the mud. And you know, we ironically did How to Succeed as the first production. So of course all that stuff came back again. The fictionalized How to Succeed is Bravo Business. So anyone who knows How to Succeed as a show, they're going to pick that up by reading it. But you don't have to hit them over the head with it. So that's the 6th, and then there's a nonfiction that memoir, which was my first book, based on my mother's journey with Alzheimer's.
Yeah, that was a fascinating book. I read that book, and so you've adjusted it now. You've done an update on that.
Yes, it was suggested a year ago that I might want to update the book, because it had been 20 years, and a lot of changes in the the statistics, the effect of what this disease is doing to families, and it's just becoming so widespread now. And then I wanted to give it a new kind of facelift, so we have a new cover art for it. My favorite picture of my mother and myself, I was 3, my mom was 26, so that's on the cover. It's a completely different cover. And the new cover, a new title called The Unexpected, which I changed from On the Sunny Side of the Street. I just wanted to do something a little new, but the fun part was including some of my mother's writing, because my mom was a wonderful wordsmith. So I thought it would be fun to honor her in that way, since she never herself published, that I could do that for her. So that also is included in the new book.
Well, that's wonderful. Yeah, for people, this would be non-showbiz now, for people who have not gone through living with people with Alzheimer's and dementia, how do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, you're in denial, of course, because the peculiarities that are coming along with this person you've known your whole life, little strange changes happening. And I was frankly in the dark, and then I took her in to have her diagnosed at Senior Services at Park Nicollet, and they did a series of tests, and they came to the conclusion that my mother was in the early stages of this thing. And it was ironic, because several months before she started having difficulty with just daily things, she was repeating herself a lot. And so I said, Mom, you just said that a couple minutes ago. She went and she laughed. She went, oh, must be my Alzheimer's. Now where that word came from, who knows? But she did say once to me, in a very terrified state of mind, Chris, I would not mind losing anything except my mind. So I think it was somewhere working within her that was something terrifying was happening. And then once we started, getting her into daycare and taking care of her ourselves, this thing progressed to the point where after a while they're completely unable to care for themselves, and so the only thing you can do is then put them in a memory care situation. And I picked trying to think, I'm having a senior moment. But I got her to Luther Hall. And one of the interesting things, I shopped around while she was still living in her apartment, and there were a vast array of different types of facilities. Some were just, you walked in, it was like the Taj Mahal. But the care was less personal. Or you went to another location, and the care was personal, but it just didn't feel right. And then the 3rd or 4th stop I made was at Luther Hall. And I walked in the door, and it was the way people were treating me that it just grabbed me. And so I was taken to a floor with a recreational area. They gave me a tour, and on the walls were different pieces of artwork done by these memory care residents. And it was absolutely incredible. They were all displayed, and I broke down in tears. I said, this is so beautiful that you're honoring these people and allowing them to still create and express themselves as much as they are able. And that sold me. And the woman said to me, the woman who was the administrator said, you know, when you have a reaction like that, you know you're home. Mm-hmm. And so I went ahead to get her on a waiting list, and things were starting to accelerate. And they finally called one day and they said, there's an opening, and we just went for it. So my mother, I would say it started probably in her 69th year, and she went through this disease process until age 78, which is the age I'm going to be in July. Which is sort of interesting that at one point it was very difficult watching her struggling. That's the hard part. And you're struggling with her, and you're saying, Mom, you're trying to help. But then I'd get in my car and I'd be in tears after, when she was still on her own, living on her own. And I say, you know, the person who needs to stop struggling is me. I have to accept this thing. And I think it's getting to that point of acceptance. You have a choice. I decided the one thing we've been imbued with in life is our wills. You can decide it's going to be a bummer and hateful and awful, or you can decide to fight this thing every step of the way. And that was what I chose. I decided to align myself with the Alzheimer's Association. I became a speaker. I became raising money for the walks. I did some facilitation of support groups. I attended every monthly adult children of Alzheimer's patients. And it was like an anchor in a storm in the sea to just keep me where I needed to be step by step. But it's an unfolding. I think Nancy Reagan said it perfectly in regards to her husband Ronald when she said, it's the longest goodbye. Because mm-hmm. you see first the facility of thinking going, then you watch the personality drifting away. That's the hard one. And then of course the body starts to go. And so it's almost in a view of a critter that's in a shell, and then the critter leaves the shell, and it's just a shell. Mm-hmm. And I used to have conversations. I'd go down and visit my mom in the late stages, and I'd be a one-sided conversation. But I had to do that just to keep myself in a place where I could be. Yeah. And just talking to her, nothing coming back, of course. So it's a difficult, ugly illness, but you can decide to make the best of it by the information you can gather and just keep working with it.
Well, thank you for sharing that and for sharing wonderful stories about show business and your books, and hope people will avail themselves of learning more.
Oh, I appreciate it, Barry. Thank you so much. Just getting the word out. Yes.
Thank you. And now, shameless plug, this is my book, and it's on Amazon, endorsed by former Vice President Mondale, as well as Sam Donaldson, and Rudy Maxa, and a lot of wonderful people who know that there are a lot more stories in here than you may think you know. So it's on Amazon, so hopefully you'll take a look. See you next time, and thank you.